My name is Ingrid Himmelman, and my session today is how to make client onboarding work for you. Here's a little bit about me. My name again is Ingrid Himmelman. I've just started at Intuit after 2 years working in Doha, Qatar as a business instructor at a college. Prior to that, I was a senior manager at Deloitte in their cloud accounting practice. I absolutely love new tech and how to make it work in businesses. So setting up those processes that make it work for you. Before I really get into the meat of my presentation, I want to tell you a little story about an onboarding experience I had. Here's a business owner, and I worked closely with her to get her business up and running in our cloud accounting practice. I taught her how to set up the apps. I worked with her to set up the bank feeds. And I figured we had done a great job onboarding and getting her ready. The bookkeeper was sure that she had everything she needed for this client to be successful. As I get started into the presentation, I want you to think through a little bit, where did I go wrong? Because the reality is, it did. So my agenda today is really short. 1, what do you need for successful onboarding? Use the 5 W's. Yes, those 5 W's from school. I'm also going to talk about how to bring it all together. And then finally, a few key takeaways that you can think about going forward as you start onboarding clients, or perhaps continue to onboard clients with any luck a little bit more successfully. Anybody who's done onboarding, you're going to know that it can be a very chaotic process. Now, this change to cloud accounting, it's a great thing. We all know the benefits of cloud, right? We got automation. We have secure storage. We have access 24/7. There's all these reasons why cloud accounting is so much better than the desktop experience. But if you've ever onboarded anybody or you're about to get started, you're going to experience some of that chaos that happens trying to get people into the cloud. So let's start with those 5 W's. What do you need for successful onboarding? Those 5 W's are going to be your bestest friend. Who, why, what, where, and when. Yeah, they're a little bit out of order from what you learned, but let's kind of delve into them a little bit more deeply. Let's start with the who. So thinking back to my story here, well, it's never just the owner. So if you were listening to me, I talked about working very closely with the owner. But the reality is that there are so many more people involved in a business, and I neglected to talk to them and to figure out how they were going to be involved in our ongoing bookkeeping when we started to work with them. So who else might be involved? Well, you'll have a manager. Again, going back to my story, there was a manager who was very heavily involved in the ongoing running of the business. She scheduled employees. She did a lot of the purchasing. She actually was doing a lot of the bookkeeping up until this point. So there was a lot of her job that was going to change as a result of us taking on their bookkeeping in a cloud environment. You also are going to have employees who are going to do timesheets. They might be responsible for some purchasing or some scheduling. So you also need to take into account what is going to happen with employees and how they should be involved with your onboarding. Then there are also going to be things like customers or suppliers. Do you want them to email in invoices? Are you going to email invoices out to customers? You need to know all of that so that you can take that into account as you're doing your onboarding. Most importantly, what you need to remember when it comes to who, it's never just the owner. I learned that the hard way, trying to prevent you doing that. Now I want to talk about why. You know why we're doing this. You know why you're encouraging clients to move to the cloud. We've already talked about it. Automation, security, access, and so on. The owner knows why they're doing it. Maybe they're looking to free up time for the manager. Maybe they want better access to their data on an ongoing basis. So you guys know why, but what about the rest of those stakeholders? Make sure they know why. Why is it good for them? And this is why I love that dial into WIFM below there. What's in it for me? Have a way to make sure they understand what is in it for them. So not you as me, but them as me, right? So maybe for employees, they'll be able to access their timesheets online, or they'll be able to access their pay stubs online. For that manager that was probably feeling a little threatened because we were taking the bookkeeping away from her, the why would be she needed more time to get all the work done associated with a growing business, and bookkeeping was the one thing that we could take off her plate. But we really needed to make sure that everybody understood the why so that we could get better engagement and could keep that process moving forward. Now we have what. What does your onboarding include? Make sure you really think this through, that you're really clear about what you're including in your onboarding service. How much training, how many meetings, how much communication. Really have a good sense of what it's going to be. Make sure everybody knows it internally. So if you have a team that's doing onboarding, they understand what your commitment is to that client. Also, make sure that your client understands what the commitment is. So if you've figured that it's going to take 20 hours to complete an onboarding, make sure everybody knows that so that the client is really clear on what's in the engagement. As importantly, what's not included. These are those gotchas, those time sucks that can just add time and energy and frustration to an onboarding experience. You might have so many hours devoted to training on the apps. At that point, when do you say to the client, if you can't figure it out, you need to go to support, or it's going to cost you more money? Make sure that you are really clear for this. I've lived this. We weren't always as clear as we could be. And then, you got into these onboarding experiences that were never ending. And that is why it's so important. Know what's included in your onboarding service. You always want to remember, time is money. And if you aren't clear, you can get into one of these never-ending onboarding services that just drags on, and all your time and energy is spent when you could be earning money elsewhere. The other thing that you want to think about is where. Where are you going to complete your onboarding? Are you planning to do it online? In today's day and age, we've all become so accustomed to Zoom, it's like second nature. But make sure that if you are planning to do that, that your client is also prepared for Zoom onboarding. And not just the owner, who very well may have access to a laptop, but what about all those employees, the manager that you need to train? How and where can you deal with them in an online environment? Do they have a conference room? Does every employee have access to a laptop? Be very careful about what you assume when you're looking to do an online onboarding. Is all of that technology available for everybody you need to deal with? If you're going to do an in-person onboarding, can you actually get everyone together? What are you going to do for those people that miss? We had a client who ran a restaurant where most of the employees didn't come to work until late in the afternoon. Would we do an onboarding session with all of those employees sort of 1 hour before? Was the client willing to pay for that? How are we going to do that? So really think through how you want to do onboarding and make sure that it's actually physically possible to do. All right, so we've gone through the who, we've gone through the why, we've gone through what, we've talked about where, and now we want to think about when. What is your deadline? When are you hoping to have this client fully operational in bookkeeping? One thing that I would recommend is don't underestimate how much time is involved in onboarding, right? There's lots of steps involved. So give yourself that time to do it. Remember, we talked about what all you're going to do. Get all those tasks written down. Know who's responsible for them. Know what is dependent on what. Is there something that has to be done before you can do something else? So for instance, you have to have the QBO file before you can do bank feeds. If you're going to do a conversion, well, you need to get the conversion done so you can have the QBO file so that you can get the bank feeds done. So really kind of know what that flow looks like so that you can plan out the tasks and when they can all be finished. Make sure you know who's going to be involved in each task and tie that together. And last but not least, how will you keep track of this all and communicate it? Now, there are a number of systems out there, project management systems or practice management systems that you can use to track all these tasks and have a plan for that. And we're going to get into a bit more about communication in a little bit. Okay, so we've talked about those 5 W's. Now we want to talk about bringing it all together. So when we talk about bringing it all together, we are talking about the how. We know all the things that we have to do. We know who's going to be involved. We know when it needs to be finished by. And now we want to come up with a plan. I always think of onboarding as a combination of project management and change management. If any of you have taken a project management course, you'll kind of recognize that onboarding has many of those elements, right? We have a clear scope. We know what it is that we're supposed to do. It should be finished when we hand it off to operations. So onboarding has a clear project element involved. There's also change management when it comes to onboarding. If you're taking someone from a desktop environment to a cloud accounting environment, there's a lot of change involved, and people are going to adapt to that differently and at different speeds. If you're just making a change from an old bookkeeper to a new bookkeeper, there's still a change. Everybody's a little bit different and everybody handles change differently. As someone who's managing onboarding, you're going to be both a project manager and a change manager. And let's talk more about how each one of those come to play. Let's talk first about change management. And this is a really common curve that's been discussed about how people experience change. Think back to when you've gone through change. You always start with like, oh my God, this is happening. And then you kind of go through this, no, I really don't need to make the change. And, we all have gone through these in a slightly different way. Everybody, every stakeholder that you're going to be dealing with as you onboard a new client into your firm and into your workflow is going to be going through similar types of change. And one of the key parts to kind of helping people get through that as the change manager is both empathy. Understand everybody's going to experience this a little differently. Some are going to be excited and some are going to be a little resistant. Going back to that manager that I talked about earlier, well, she was afraid because we were switching and we were taking bookkeeping off her plate. So she felt a little bit threatened by it. I've had other people who've been really excited by it. So just having empathy, put yourself in their shoes and try to think how they would be feeling about it. One way to do that is communication, right? Go back to that why. Explain why this is a good thing. Constantly communicate that. Make sure that they are kept in the loop on when things are happening and how you're going to help them get through that change, right? You're going to provide them training on the apps. All of that are ways to make the change management part of onboarding more successful. Now we have the project management. If you've ever taken a project management course, lots of the words on here are going to be familiar. It really doesn't matter what words you use when it comes to project management and onboarding, but just recognize that you're going to go through this flow. You need to define your scope. That's what is included in your onboarding and what's not included. Make sure you know that. Who all your stakeholders are. That's the who. What are all those tasks that have to be done and when do they need to be done by? And how are you going to communicate? When it comes to communication, it's important that you understand who and how you're going to communicate with all of those different stakeholders. If you rely on email and they like text, you've got a bit of an issue. Some things really should go through email. Some things it's okay to go through text. Do they prefer to have in-person phone calls or meetings? Understand who you need to communicate with and how, and make sure that you have a plan to keep that going. Here we are in a QBOA test file that we've got. And you'll notice over on the left, you have a work tab. And when we click on that, it brings us into a practice management tool that you can use today to help you manage your different client files. And you'll notice that over here in the top right, we have a create project option. And if we open up that, Intuit has already created a client onboarding template that you can use for managing your client onboarding. If we select that, we can then give this project a name, select a test file to work with. You can obviously use a real one. I'm just using a test one. Set a due date for our onboarding. So let's say we want to have this client fully operational by the end of May. I can assign it to me or anybody in my team. Give it a detail. And the great part about it is that you will also notice that it lists out a number of the tasks that are already very common for onboarding. Now, is this going to be as detailed as you may be envisioning in your mind? Maybe not. But the reality is that this is a great starting point. You can always make your own templates or you can add to this one. Within each task, you can set particular due dates for those, assign them to yourself or to other people on the team, and so on. So this can be a great way to get you going with onboarding and an onboarding project, a way to keep track of it all. All right, so I can save that project and then those files will show up here. This is one way to do it. Now, what if you need to ask the client for something? You want to make sure that you get them to send you documents or everything that you're looking for. You can create a client request. And in here, we have to give it a title first. We can then select the client that we want this to be for. Set a due date. So for instance, let's say that I want bank statements by the end of next week. And then from here, I can simply click share. We can we can add a message in here and then you click share and now it's going to go out to the client asking them to be involved as well. So using this tool already available for you in QBOA is one way to get started with practice management. If you already have another system in place, maybe it's Monday.com or it's Carbon or whatever, use that to help you keep track of onboarding. There are a lot of moving parts in onboarding, and so making sure that you have it written down and you have a way to keep track of what's due when and by whom, you are far more likely to be successful. If you want more information about the Work tab in QBOA, I've included a link here in the presentation. Again, it's a great way to get started with practice management. Here we are, we're getting close to the end now. I want to go over the key takeaways that I want you to remember as a result of this presentation. 1, find all the stakeholders that are going to be involved in this cloud accounting engagement. It's never just the owner. My mistake number 1. Once you know that, also make sure that you determine what they're doing today. What are their current processes? And understand that whatever they're doing today, looking at how that might change as you move forward is going to cause change for them. And that change means that you need to have empathy for the people involved. Remember that. Not everybody is going to go through change the same way. Have a plan. Write it down, right? You can use the tools in QBOA. You can use a spreadsheet. Make sure that you have it all written down, all those steps that need to be done in order for onboarding to be completed and successful. Whatever you do, don't rely on your memory. Write it down. Then implement it. Trust your plan, work with your plan, and get through that implementation. If things start to go off the rails, go back to your plan and figure out where you're going to bring it back in line. And most importantly, communicate, communicate, communicate. When you are onboarding a new client, there's going to be changes. Make sure that you are talking to all of those stakeholders. Keep them in the loop. Use the tools of communication that work for them. be it Slack, be it email, a meeting, whatever the case may be, work together with them. Keep all of your stakeholders in the loop. So that's it. That's how you can make onboarding work for you. Use the 5 W's to lay it all out. Then bring that plan together. Remember that you have a role as both a project manager and a change manager to get that client from doing whatever they are doing today and into your successful cloud accounting practice. Thanks very much for taking part in this session. I'm looking forward to the questions in the Q&A. And if you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, my profile is connected below.